Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Erin. Erin, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Erin, I love it. So I'm really excited about this subject, but your background is super relevant. So if you don't mind, could you share just a couple of things about your background, how you got into marketing, what your passions are, and then we'll kind of dive into the subject for the day.
Yeah, excited to talk about it. So I went to college back when the internet was first becoming a thing, and I went to journalism school thinking I was going to be the next Lois Lane. And come to find out, I really didn't have the guts to fully dive into the investigative reporting like I thought I did. But I really had a knack for, I loved the writing, the words, the investigative part, not the reporting. And because the internet was kind of becoming a thing when I was graduating, I decided as a way to continue to make myself relevant in my career, I would learn about the internet and what all went into making things appear online. So over the course of my career, I have done that. I've combined a love for words and general storytelling words with a passion for kind of understanding how people use search engines, and have arrived at where I'm at now a lot of years later with doing SEO full-time for one of the larger B2B media companies in the United States, kind of helping a lot of folks understand marrying the words that they're using, how they're writing, and understanding how people are finding their content online.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, today's conversation is all about SEO. And what's really cool about this conversation is we're going down a pathway where most people I don't feel like are talking a ton about. So let me kind of give a little backstory here. There's two avenues when I think of SEO and AI. And the one hand is really using AI to generate SEO optimized content. And there are startups and there are businesses that are really optimized for this, and people are churning out content left and right. And people are talking about this. On the other hand, though, it is the idea of using AI as your search engine and how that world kind of works and how to optimize and work around that. We're going to focus on the latter. We're going to focus on how are people's search experiences changing? How do we adapt to that? What do we think about that? All of that stuff. So, Erin, initial thoughts. What is search turning into when it comes to generative AI, and how are people's behavior changing utilizing these tools?
One of the things I wanted to touch on with those people using AI to write the content, the journalist in me, it's like nails on a chalkboard to think of using a tool to write content for you. But I also, again, I am a journalist at heart. I mean, that's what my background is. So to me, it's like, no, like we need to use the words in our head and typed on the computer, but we're not going to touch on that. As far as using generative AI as a search engine, I kind of think of that. I remember when Pinterest was first becoming a thing, and how often people would say that people were using Pinterest as a search engine because anything that they needed to find, they were looking on Pinterest. How do I do this? How do I recalibrate my computer? How do I do something? They were using Pinterest because it was a curation tool or it was aggregating all of these different pieces and parts of content. And then you would hear people, and by people, it started to trend. Younger generations would be using Instagram for search. I wanted to learn this. I wanted to do this. So they would use Instagram. Now, most recently in the last few months, you're hearing a lot of Gen Z is utilizing TikTok for a search engine. When I think of all of that, and then I also think of like generative AI tools, it definitely makes you realize like, I almost wonder how much Google is becoming the Facebook of search when it comes to younger generations. And generative AI is becoming like the TikTok component of like, okay, I want to know something. And rather than go on this tool that my parents use or my parents have used, I'm going to go into this newer tool maybe to search for things. I hear that a lot. I did some work with some Northwestern University grad students this past summer. It was like a journalism cohort with Northwestern grad students, and was asking them a lot of questions of like, well, how much do you use generative AI? Like, how do you use it? Are you using it to write? And thankfully, to my journalism loving heart, they said nope. But they were using it a lot to research, which now in speaking with my colleagues, whether they are my journalist content focused folks, if they are, event or marketing side folks, what I'm hearing a lot of is, yes, I'm using generative AI to give me ideas, to give me research, to give me thoughts and ideas that I wasn't finding on a Google search result. And I'm like, you know what? I like it. That makes sense. That to me, that makes sense that it's using, the large language models to kind of scan and as much as how we used to use not we, but people used to use Pinterest to be like, how do I do this thing? Or how do I find this information? It's like, it's almost like come back for full circle of all it was looking at was like all of the content that it was scanning. Pinterest in and of itself was a large language model. Instagram, similar thing. It's all words that, the engines would be searching for, looking for matches, and then replicating that and then spitting the content back out. That's what generative AI has been doing too.
Yeah, there's an interesting element there I hadn't really thought of before. Basically all these tools are search engines. And I love how you put that and framed it because you're right. I wouldn't search Pinterest for everything. I'd search Pinterest for a certain kind of content. Same with like the way I use Twitter or X or the company formerly known as Twitter. But when I look for real-time live updates, I know that I'm going on Twitter. For example, if there's a sporting event or something like that, or something's happening in the world, and I want like boots on the ground, real time information, I go to Twitter. I don't go to Google because Google doesn't get me what I'm looking for. It doesn't change the fact that Google still is my default way of finding websites. But it's interesting that the other search engines are for other pieces of content. So I love that. So if I'm a business, right? And I want to take advantage of this new search engine where people are doing research. How do I start to think about that? How do I start to do I try to get the links if they're not getting links, or is it mindshare? Like how do I wrap my head around this idea that I'm providing AI value, but what am I getting in return? How do you kind of start to look at that?
When I think of the tactical side of how do I utilize this tool to help me with SEO, I also think of how, like, when I talk to my content folks, when I talk to my teams and try and instruct them on SEO and understanding SEO, a lot of it comes down to like, do you understand the message? Like, when you are writing your content, or what is the outcome that you're trying to get? And let me peel that back by saying, like, it's not enough. Like, when you are someone who is so, I know what it is that I'm trying to sell. I know what it is, what my product is. I'm trying to get it out there. I know it backwards, forwards, you name it. I'm just trying to get it out in front of people. And it's like, well, that's great. But 99.9% of people don't know your product as intimately as you do. And you almost have to back up, have someone else who doesn't know your content very well come in and look at it. And I feel like with generative AI tools, so I'm going to use like ChatGPT, and I think of those tools as like from the SEO side, how I work with folks to be like, I'm just looking at your website. I don't know your content as intimately as you do. When I look at your website, when I look at your headlines, your content, I look at it from the same approach as like a search engine or someone searching for it. Like if your titles, if your content doesn't make sense to me right off the bat, guess what? That's just like a search engine. You may know what you were trying to say, and you may have shortened it and shorthanded how you wrote it because that makes sense to you. Me, who doesn't know it, it doesn't make sense to me. I feel like when it comes to generative AI, it can help with that. It can be like, okay, for example, you could use a generative AI, like put in what your elevator pitch is, or put in like a long, lengthy description of your product or what it is that you're trying to sell. Put a sales document, sales pitch in there, and ask generative AI, ask ChatGPT, summarize what my business proposition is to me, and see what, again, because these tools are large language models and they're just looking at words. They're going to regurgitate, they're going to spit back out like, okay, well, these are the keywords, this is what we're seeing, this is what we're understanding of what you're telling us. And it's like, I feel like those tools, you ask like, well, how can someone get started? Speak to or interact with these tools the same way you would a person that you're trying to like sell something to, or an intern, someone new to your company, a new junior account executive, junior analyst, I'm thinking someone junior, but like someone entry level. Like, how would you describe what your product is? How would you describe a sales pitch? What is your sales proposition? What is it that you do better than others? Do that with the content that you have or that you're thinking of. Put that into a generative AI tool and use that to help you brainstorm. It's not something that you would necessarily do on Google. Like, all right, you wouldn't tell Google, like, hey, Google, summarize my sales proposition. Explain to me in 5 bullet points what this sales proposition says. Google's not going to do that. But a tool like, Gemini or ChatGPT, that's what it's perfect for.
I love it. A lot of the times on traditional search engines, we provided value and they gave us links. That was kind of that was the relationship. Hey, Google, I'll format how you want it. I'll put your title tags in, and sure, here's schema and this and that. And you give me links. You can crawl my content. You can get people happy, but send people my way. When it comes to providing content that is going to be spit out as answers from generative AI, is there a difference in how we create content? How does the relationship as the originator of thought change with AI in that landscape?
I honestly don't think that there's a big difference in, how you would write your content so that it would be picked up by search engine by Google, because even Google is looking. Google, neither Bard, Gemini, Google itself, ChatGPT, they don't, and this seems so simplistic, but it's like they don't have brains. They are legitimately looking for words and terms in a row, phrases. They don't understand context necessarily. They are legitimately looking for, here's this phrase. I see that you're looking for this kind of phrase. I happen to have information, or I happen to have something that has that particular phrase. Here, let me give it to you. One of the dashboards that I look at to kind of gauge where we're at Endeavor on like, how are we doing with our search traffic across, all of our properties? How are we doing, with referral traffic and what have you? And something that I've been tracking is what kind of traffic are we getting from these different tools? And it's like, we are predominantly getting traffic from ChatGPT. What's really interesting to me is a lot of the links that we are getting from ChatGPT are more of our like electronic or machine or very engineering specific things, which to me makes sense that it's like, okay, if you're asking it to explain like a theory or something, and we have a lot of content that describes a lot of engineering, very technical information. I mean, we're B2B media. We aren't for the consumer. We are for the business. We have a lot of technical specifications that we write about on our sites. We get a lot of links to these things that are very, from things that are very technical. The websites that are getting the most are things that are very technical, which to me, it's like, well, like a GPT, the cutoff for the model that it's using is 2021. It's like, you're not going to get, hey, what's the latest regulations on red food dye 40? Like, you're not going to get that in GPT. And not to go off on a completely different tangent, but I've even noticed things like Q3, Q4 Bard and its results versus like Gemini in the last month have just been wildly different. It's almost like adding Gemini just completely disrupted all the, like, what I've loved about Gemini, Bard/Gemini, it's like it was using Google, like it had all of its results right there. And it's like, it almost had like worse performance on things that it could have, like these tools could have used in their own repository. But I will say some of the links that I noticed that we do get from Bard/Gemini are titles that are reporting on more like, here's the news and here's the things that are going on. So it's an interesting breakdown. And I just went off on a wild tangent answering that, but
No, that's awesome. I love it. I love it. These are awesome insights. Well, as promised, the episode goes by super quick. Like, it's really sometimes frustrating because there's so much that we can kind of unravel. There's a lot more layers to the onion, but thank you so much for sharing your insights. Erin, if anyone wants to continue the conversation with you, how do they reach out and connect with you online?
Probably the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. So you can find me if you look for Erin A. Hallstrom. Believe it or not, there are 2 Erin Hallstroms in publishing. And I optimize for my own name by going by my middle initial. How's that for being an SEO nerd?
Very nice. I love it.
Yeah. So I have you can find me on LinkedIn. I do have a website, erinhallstrom.com, but that's more a portfolio, but it has links to find me on LinkedIn too.
Love it. And we'll link to that in the show notes. So, Erin, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.